All right, just because we have so much content to get through today, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And we are recording this, so you will get the recording after and the deck, although it's just the questions on the deck. But we're really excited that you're here, and thank you for taking time out to join us to talk about user data, everyone's favorite topic. And we've got a really great panel for you all today, but just really quickly, a little bit about Balboa. Balboa was created to basically help companies get the most out of their data. So this webinar is very timely, and we hope that you gain a lot of insight and perspective from the group we have for you here today. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce everyone just really quickly. We have Keith Wagner, who's actually the founder of Balboa here. And Keith comes to us with with 8 years of product experience, specifically product management and ops, and is a Pendo Power user who's been using Pendo for at least 6 years. Similarly, Sarah is also a great asset here, but she is our principal consultant here at Balboa with 15 years of software and CX experience. She's going to be a voice to all the CS people on the call today. So we're really excited for her perspective. And then finally, we have Wes, who is the VP of Product Management at Clarivate. And he also has an extensive Pendo knowledge and has been using it for around 4 years. So we may have some answers that talk about the tools that we use. So you may hear Pendo come up a few times. And by the way, I'm Hannah, and I am new to the Balboa team, but actually come from Pendo. I worked at Pendo about 6 years, and just really excited to meet with you all today. Okay, so we're going to get started. So for our panel, I'd love to hear from all of you for this particular question, because I think that you'll all have unique perspectives on it. So why do you believe user data is such a game changer for business today? And Wes, if you want to kick us off with this, that'd be great.
Sure. It's not just a game changer for today. It's been a game changer for a while. It's just that a lot of companies really haven't realized or accepted that yet. But yeah, if you're not looking at the data of how your product's being used, what people think of it, what they're not using, what they're not adopting, then things might work out in the beginning as far as launching a product or a new feature. But over time, competitors are going to beat you just because they're looking at their data. So they're going to be able to make decisions off of that data and really know their customer, which is the key thing that every textbook is out there telling you, is that you need to know your customer. And data is honestly the easiest way to start there.
Mhm.
That's great. Sarah, do you want to kick us off with the CS take on this?
Absolutely. And I completely agree with Wes. I think it's not a game changer, it's table stakes at this point. There's so much talk around knowing your customer, building out your customer journey, understanding what the various milestones are. This talk about being proactive versus reactive. The only way you're going to be able to execute on any of that is by understanding how your users are interacting and engaging with your product and staying active and evaluating that. So it is the fabric of everything that we do to help continue that um, the the buyer's journey through the customer journey and continue to increase your users. Yeah, so I think it's just the fabric. It's the foundation of everything that we do.
Love it.
Mhm.
Keith?
Yeah, so it wasn't too long ago in our business society where people would release products and you wouldn't have any idea how that was being used. You had to ask people, how do you like this product? Or is it solving your problems? And many times you didn't even have that because your users were not somebody that you could connect with. We are now at a time where we can see what people are doing on a daily basis in the application, and understanding what they're doing rather than what they're saying is crucial to understand how to better your product. Instead of saying, okay, what is the competitor doing? you say, okay, what is the customer need? What are they wanting? What are they asking for based off of their behavior, not just based off of their feedback?
Love that. Thank you. And for to kind of expand upon that just a little bit more, could maybe Sarah and Wes, can you share a real world example where tapping into your user data made that big difference for the company?
Yeah, I'm gonna take this one because it just expounds off of what Keith just said. And unfortunately it is still happening, Keith, where products are being released and then, you know, leadership is coming to individuals like myself and saying, hey, we need to 10x the usage of this feature. Right? We just released this really shiny thing. And so my example here is this happened to me. I was at a point of sale solution, and that's exactly what happened. Sarah, we need you to 10x this usage of this feature within our existing customers. And when we looked at the data, we saw that only 5% of the customers knew that it existed. And we're talking thousands of SMB customers here. And we looked at those that were using it, and we found that 80% of them were abandoning it after the first time they used it. So they'd use it once and then they wouldn't use it again, right? And so it started to kind of it was a light bulb in my head going, what is happening with this feature that people just aren't finding it useful? Is it not resonating? Do we not have the right, is it not applicable to their business? And so after reporting that insight back to the CEO that asked me to 10x this feature, I partnered with our UX research team, and we went really deep on trying to understand exactly what was happening, and found out that this feature just wasn't robust enough to meet our needs, and that helped us influence the product roadmap and gave us more insight into how to guide the customer to use the feature. So we were able to increase awareness and adoption for a specific subset of customers, but not the entire, our total addressable market or the perceived addressable market from product was completely off. And so we had to continue it forced us to go back and iterate. Wes, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, similar. I got, a couple quick examples. Most recently, I tend to pick up product like inherit products. And so there was one where I remember just a couple weeks ago having a conversation about a certain workflow in a business tool. And the question was, how are people actually using this? And the first response was, well, looking at the data using Pendo, ironically, looking at the data, we're like, well, no, it doesn't look like it gets used by more than 1%, and it only gets used a couple times per year. And so people started to jump on, well, then maybe we should sunset that piece, take it out so we don't have to worry about maintaining it. But then the right question was asked, which is, okay, well, hold on. Let's go a level deeper. Can we figure out who's using it? Because maybe that thing is not an important thing to do year round by many people, but maybe it's used by a core super user of the product and they have to have that capability every year. And if we take it out, then all of a sudden we will get 100 customer complaints from different customers. And so that's a real world example where you look at the data first and you then are prompted to ask more questions, kind of peel back the onion, and then you can come to a better answer on what to do with a specific product or features. And then over a decade ago, kind of the opposite, there was a piece of software that I didn't inherit, but was helping out on. And we started to look at the data and the usage of it, and it just honestly became real to us that people really just weren't using it at all, the entire product. And that led us to actually kill the product. So at the end of the day, it helped us save money because we didn't continue investing in that product from a development perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a sales time perspective, any of that. So yeah, if when you have this type of information at your fingertips, you can actually make decisions like that, as opposed to getting in the trap of, oh, we're going to continue to grow this every year and we'll just keep adding features, Melissa Perry's feature trap, like it's just, you get stuck in that if you don't have the data to look at.
Yeah, and I love that in both you and Sarah's examples. It wasn't the user data in question wasn't just the click data, which is typically like where a new person would just start with analytics, looking at how many clicks, but you kept digging and digging and digging into the data, and didn't just stop at that first layer.
Right.
Okay. So let's toss this over to Keith. Keith, what are the biggest challenges companies face when working with user data?
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of companies, and something I see a lot is silos in between teams. Data is for everybody to use. It's not just for a product team. It's not just for a marketing team. It's not just for the sales team. And when you have people looking at data with a different lens and not sharing that data with others, you don't ever get the big picture. So having a team of people that can look at data together, maybe even just on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, where you bring some insights that you have found in relation to how you're seeing the product, that can help others find the same thing. And another one I do see is vanity metrics. A lot of times people have a great idea and they really want people to buy into it. So they will find data that supports their idea, which is great. You should always find data that supports your idea, but they fail to find the data that might be against their idea. So something I always tell people to do in this case to make sure that you and others are not falling into the trap of just looking for vanity metrics is always have somebody else look at your data and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Can you find any holes in this? Can you find something else that might say that my assumptions are not correct?
I love that. And piggybacking off of that, because Sarah and I actually had a chat about this a while ago, and I just saw it posted in the chat here. Analysis paralysis is also a challenge that I think a lot of people typically run into. And Sarah, I think you had some good points on that if you wanted to share how you kind of get around that or encourage others to not feel that way.
Yeah, I think that you have to have a source of truth and come to the table with what Keith said. What really does matter when we're measuring the success of a feature or a product. We went through an exercise at my previous company where we sat down with product, with sales, with various stakeholders and created a feature adoption framework to say if we are going to report on the adoption of certain features and whether or not and get to a point where we can say do features and products actually drive back to retention. We need to have a single source of truth so that we're all speaking the same language and we have that common fabric, because I think that's what it, just building upon what Keith said, you can get into a meeting and how often are your product team saying, hey, this feature was, or anyone, this feature was really successful because 45% have adopted it. But then as a CS person, I'm like, no, actually they're not. I'm not seeing that. Right. And then you get into this conflict. So I think you need to, really get together and discuss what matters. What does adoption mean? What does applicability mean? Right. What are all of the applicable customers that this product or feature could impact? And once you have that clearly defined, then you can really dig in with each other, use additional user data to drive meaningful adoption and growth within your customer base.
I think
And
it's
would
huge,
you
Sarah.
go
Oh,
ahead?
I wanted to add to that a little bit. It's just understanding that you're not always going to have all the data. Having a source of truth is extremely important, but telling yourself, I'm never going to have everything. I need to be able to make this decision. And what I like to do is set deadlines for making decisions. I've had features where we determined that this was a problem for the customer. Everybody agreed on that. And then it took a year to even make a decision on what to do about it. I don't care if the decision is to not use this tool and not use that tool. That's fine. But as long as we're making decisions and setting those deadlines, we can make sure that our customers are not floundering while we are in that analysis paralysis phase.
Yeah, and if I can, like, kind of combining what Keith and Sarah said. So, one of the ways besides time boxing, which I love, when you're doing your analysis, but you won't on it if you're trying to do all the analysis yourself, you've got the bias of yourself, right? So that's where sometimes you may be presenting vanity metrics and you don't even realize it. But to Sarah's point, if on a regular basis you're involving not just a product person and or a UX person, but also a developer, a QA person, a customer success, customer care, a sales or account manager person, you kind of have this multifunctional group that's looking at the insights that you and other people are finding in the data, then you'll probably get through kind of the answer of whether it's a valid insight or not quicker, because you're going to have all those perspectives there to say, oh, no, I know that I've heard this, I've seen this, as opposed to you trying to by yourself find the answer or see if it's real or not. So, yeah, break down the silos, have many people, stakeholders on that product, look at the data with you, maybe have some of them that also know how to use the tool and go look at the data themselves, and then you come together and do that. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck doing it yourself, you're going to have biases, and you're not going to have the real answers to the questions that you're looking for.
I love it. And I agree with Robert. Those were very great responses. So thank you all for your insight and specifics on that. What role do analytics tools like Appendo, it could be anything, but similar to Appendo, play in making user data actionable? And Keith, since I know you're a Appendo expert, I'd love to hear from you on this.
Yeah, I do love Pendo. I've been working with it for a while. I think it's a tool that makes it easier to do the things that we want to do as a business. It's just like any tools out there that help us perform a job. If you were just walking across the street, then walking's perfectly fine. But if you had a walk that was going to take you 40 minutes, you need a tool to help you do that. You could go do that, but getting a car is probably going to be much better for you. And that's what Pendo does, is it allows you to do a lot more data insights and get a lot more data insights without having to go to development and create hundreds, sometimes even thousands of track events that send to a data warehouse, and then you have to pull it all into the same place. It is a way for you to be able to visualize that data, to tag that data, and give the ability to do that to people outside of development, in this case, to product managers, sometimes to marketing, to CX ops. All those people can have users in a tool like Pendo, and that allow them to find these insights as well without having to go through various steps or asking a data insights team or a data analytics team to find it for them.
And Wes, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, you think about 20 years ago, how were you getting data? Or say before Google Analytics came into play, how were you getting data? You were having your developers log specific events in a raw log and then trying to figure out how to use that data and look through it. We're well past that today, but at the same time, tools like Pendo, they've done a lot of the work for you to help surface up things that you may be interested in looking at or things that they recommend that you look at. Because we're collecting so much data now, qualitative, quantitative, especially with tools like Pendo that do both. It's just so much to go through. And, I don't know about you, but most product people I know and most UX people I know are not statisticians. They didn't go to school for analyzing thousands and thousands of rows of data and then being an Excel wizard and putting it together. So these tools, they do that lifting for you. Again, going back to like the previous question conversation, it allows you to ask questions faster and allows other people to ask questions faster. So that again, you're not stuck just doing this raw analysis. Now you have a place to start and you can just get through it faster, make some decisions. Honestly, and I want to say it's not just decisions, like make some bets. We're all going to make wrong bets. Like that just happens, but it allows you to fail faster if you want to use that catchphrase, because now you can get to those questions, some data faster, test something real quick, see the results of that, move on to the next thing. So it makes it faster and easier for everyone, not just someone who's really good at data.
Yeah, and it's funny, as you're speaking, a question got asked right as you were saying qualitative and quantitative data. So anyone can answer this on the panel here, but how do you find that balance between user sentiment and usage data, the qualitative and the quantitative? Do you find yourself leaning more towards one? How do you weight them in your mind?
So I don't take it as weighting. I take it more as maybe which one I start with.
Mm.
So quantitative data. So just it could be clicks, usage of tools, events, things like that. That, and I'm kind of stealing this from a conversation with Keith earlier. It tells you how people are actually using your product, what they're actually looking at, what they're ignoring, where they're having pain points. So that's great. You have some what and what they're doing and maybe even how they're doing it. But then you still want the qualitative data to understand why. Why is it that you use this feature the most? Why is it that no one touches this feature at all? And if you think in terms of a UX researcher, right, they're going to go in, hopefully they're going to have done some quantitative analysis themselves before coming up with the questions that they would ask in a user interview. But the questions they're going to ask, those users are going to answer the way they think they should answer it or what they think they want and need, which is fine. You still want that perspective, but you got to pair it to actual quantitative data. So again, I don't think it's a weighting thing. I think it's you have to put them together, but it's easier and maybe smarter to start with the quantitative data so that you know what questions to ask in the qualitative arena.
Yeah, you have to be able to tell a big picture story. And I have something funny that happened not a few months ago with something just with this. I got an email from a product I really liked, and they had asked a question about a feature that I really wanted to like. And they said, "Hey, how would you feel if we removed support for this and you weren't able to use this anymore?" And this is a feature I really wanted to use. It was something that was really cool, but I never actually used it, or I rarely ever used it. And so I answered the question with, yes, I would really want to keep this. Please don't remove it. I would feel terrible if you got rid of this. And I'm going to be honest, that feature I have not used since that survey went out. And I told them I really liked it. And I still want to use it. I still want to go in and use that on a daily basis, but it's just not something I'm actually doing. And so users are always going to tell you how they feel about something, but that doesn't mean that they will actually use that part of the product. And so you have to pair anything somebody says with user behavior analytics. You have to take everything users say with a grain of salt, because just like my example, what they say might not actually translate to what they do.
Yeah.
Mm.
Can I give you a quick nuance on that? So
Yeah.
who here has heard of doing fake doors on a website or a product, right? Where you put a link or a call to action and there's actually nothing behind it except maybe just a static page. Or if you're really good, you put, oh, this was something we were thinking of building. Why did you click on the link, right?
Mm.
Like in that example, there's actually there it's great if you can see actual usage that, oh, someone was interested in that call to action. And then maybe you can collect some qualitative survey information about why they clicked on it. You could still run into a trap there because, when you see some new product on the market or app in your phone, how many of us have done the call to action, installed the app on the phone, looked at it once, and then we're like, not going to use this anymore. Fake doors can have that same problem unless you're doing some type of follow-up to to reinforce that they would click it again. So that's where, yeah, you have to use both pieces of data to back each other up on whether this is something that is actually going to get used or is actually being used by a customer.
Yeah. And then I know, Sarah, you probably really want to say things too, but I have one more thing to add to that. Tying data back to, so we talked about tying feedback to data. You can also tie data back to feedback. And one way that I like to do that is looking at rage clicks. So as people are going in the application, you can track those. You can track those in many different ways. Pendo has one. We talked about Pendo earlier. And you can see how many people are going in and saying, oh, I'm trying to click this button and it's not doing what I want. And you can see the feedback that they leave when they were on that page. And then you can see how they feel about that page specifically. And so it goes both ways. You can lean certain ways. I like to lean on user behavior analytics a little more, but you cannot tell the whole story unless you have both.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that's a good thing. I was nodding my head during the entire thing. You need a blend of both. I'm very passionate about customer sentiment and customer feedback. I think it's what helps me shape the customer journey and understand the different milestones that they need to progress and or why they're not progressing. So I'll leave it at that because I know we want to open it up for some additional questions, and I think maybe we have one more question, but you guys said it well.
Yeah, and I think too, just as something I had to use a lot when I was at Pendo is something like an NPS survey, where you're used to getting, the number score and the written feedback if someone leaves it. One of the cool things in Pendo that I would look at was if someone was a detractor, what pages or features did they use the most versus people who were happy? And that was always a really interesting way to think about looking at that data that I'd never really considered before. So when you talk about rage clicks and being able to see, well, where are the unhappy people? Where do they go? What did they all have in common? I think it's a really interesting take. Anyway, I know I'm not on the panel. I just wanted to throw that in there.
We love your insights, Hannah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So what advice would you give to a company who's just starting to integrate user data into their day-to-day operations? Keith, you want to start us off with this one? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm here, I promise. I want to go off something that Sarah actually just said. So I had mentioned that I like to lean on user behavior, and then she said that she likes to really look at that feedback. And of course, we both use both, but that's perfect. Having multiple people on a team that have different insights is huge. I am never going to get it right. And by myself. Sarah's never going to get it right by herself. Wes is the same. If we get all those people together, they will have those kind of insights. They will look at data differently and be able to pull those in. Starting with teams like that is going to help you understand the data right off the bat. But something I love to tell people when starting off with user analytics is to start with a question in mind. It can be something small. It could be something that you're interested in. It could be something that the business is interested in. But when you start to set up the analytics, there's some hard parts about it. You have to do tagging. You have to say, which pages do I want to look at? Which features do I want to look at? And it can get overwhelming. But if you have that question in mind of what you are looking for, everything you learn, you can tie back to that question and work to answer that. And as soon as you get that answered, you will have more questions in mind because you learned about other things that you can and cannot track. It's just like I like to play instruments, and I would never have started to learn an instrument just to get excited about playing scales. That is not something you do as an instrument. You have something you want to do with it. You have a band that you want to join. You have a song that you really want to play. You heard some sort of amazing quartet and you want to be able to play just like what you heard. That is your goal. And it's the same with starting off with data analytics. You have to have that question or it can get very overwhelming at the start.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, feeding right off of that, I was going to say start small. And I think that's the perfect way to do it, Keith, is start with one question that you really care about and then start from there. It's you don't want to be like my daughter was a couple weekends ago, where I took her for the first time to a big box store that does outdoor sporting equipment and stuff, and she walks in and she likes to fish. I don't, but she does. She walks in and a third of the store is fishing poles and lures and all this stuff, and it's like she literally told me, I don't know where to start. So if you think about a tool, whether it's Google Analytics or Hotjar or Pendo, whatever it is, there's so many features and so much data in there.
Mm-hmm.
Any of us, like, it's overwhelming when you first get in there. It's sensory overload. So, okay, step back, think about one thing you want to do, ask an expert to help you figure out how to do or get that one thing, and then start from there and just learn and progress slowly and do it with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have much to add. I'll just give a real example for the CS and CX leaders out there. For me, going down this journey, I really needed to understand a segment of customers, right? I didn't look at every single one of our customers, but I wanted to really understand the behavior of our free customers. What happens when they log into our app? Where do they go? How long are they there? What do they do? What do they not do? Why do they log out, right? What features are they using on a basis? And really sitting down next to my colleagues to outline that and just validate it. Are you also seeing, this is what I'm seeing, here are the different pathways that these customers are taking? And so that dissection of customers really helped us understand, what was important to them and how we needed to lead them down this path. And also, eventually, how do we continue to help graduate them to the next tier? How do we get them out of that free segment and um, into that paid tier? So start small, but maybe it's just looking at a segment of customers that you really need to understand, because maybe you have an attrition problem, which is where I started.
I think that's big, starting with the segment, and don't underestimate the power of having fun with it. So you're going to be looking at segments. I had somebody once when we were looking at data, starting off with data, and they just really wanted to know how people in Texas use the application. Why we were a worldwide company, but they were just so curious because they lived in Texas. And they're like, I wonder how many people are using this in Texas and if they're using it more than others. It really didn't. That question was just something fun for them. And they learned how to make a segment. They learned how to check where the business was and to make that segment, to start looking at that data. And then they started really asking a lot of more deep questions after they did that. But having fun with it is something I love to do. And then when you can bring a lot of really great data, 90% of what you bring into a report is super fun data. And then 10% is something that's just like, hey, here's a really funny thing I found with the data. It gets people engaged, and it gets you engaged on actually finding the data as well.
I love that. I used to look whenever there was like a big TV event, like the Super Bowl, just seeing if like who's actually working right now during the Super Bowl. And I'm curious, do you all have any experience with struggling to get buy-in from your company, other teams about using this data, and how do you navigate and get around that?
Yes. I don't think anyone here is going to say no. The first roadblock you always run into is, well, I don't have time to look at the data, right? And so that's where you have to show, and it could be through someone else's case study, it could be through your own kind of research and case study, it could be through a book, whatever it is. You have to show that when you have data to make decisions, you will spend less time later fixing those decisions.
Hmm.
So spend a little bit more time up front, not a lot. Don't do the analysis paralysis, but do a little bit more time up front to figure out what outcomes you actually need to deliver to your customers. And then you'll spend less time fixing it or pivoting later. Um, and that's the biggest one, is I don't have time for that. Money can be an issue too. I mean, just to be real, if you're going to use a tool that you pay for, then, writing the business case up and getting the right people in your executive team to back you up that this is what we need, and here's the reasons why, here's the value it's going to bring, the money it's going to save us, or the money it's going to bring in by using this tool. Time and money. I mean, this is business, right? Time and money is kind of the two major things you have to do. And then sometimes I've actually found naysayers who, for whatever reason, they don't think the tools are going to help them. That is literally the thing I get. And it's like, that's a harder one. Like, that's a major mindset change that might be having to go above them and have someone delegate to them that, or dictate to them that they have to do this. But yeah, those are kind of the three hurdles I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen this. I've seen this a lot as well in that same thing. And I think you have to step back, because everybody's going to ask themselves this question on how to do this better, on how to get more buy-in. And you have to make sure you step back and realize this is not a data question. This is a culture question on how to change the culture.
Mhm.
There's a book I really love. by Roger Connors called Change the Culture, Change the Game. If you have not read it, highly recommend it. It's about culture change in organizations just like this. And I think the best thing that you can do is lead by example by bringing data to your meetings. He gave a great example in this book of somebody wanting to change the culture of the open door policy at a company. This person got in, he was a new manager, and nobody ever talked about anything. And so he wanted to lead with some big thing. He wanted to show, I'm serious about this open door policy. And so he did that by taking the door off of his office and showing people, I'm serious about this. And if you do the same thing with data and say, hey, we're serious about this. This is a report I'm bringing in to this data, to this decision I want to make. I want to show you this. I want to show you this is why I'm making the decision. People will start to ask you questions. How did you find that data? I want to be able to support my ideas too. That is because you can't force people. You can't tell them you have to use this every time, because they will do it begrudgingly and they won't get what they can get out of it if they were doing it because they wanted to, if the culture was leading them to that.
Yeah, I think I want to build off of what you just said, because I think it's important. From my perspective, I brought in a tool. I brought in Pendo to my last organization, and we did through our.
Hold on
we
one
developed.
second.
Yeah.
Sarah, is anyone else's microphone is that Sarah's microphone that's messed up, or my speakers? Oh, Keith, you're muted.
I heard it too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was Sarah's mic. Can you say something again, Sarah?
Oh no, am I better?
Oh,
it's good now.
Now it's great.
We're
Okay,
good.
we just had to call it
Okay.
out. Okay, we're good.
Whew. All right, no, it's good. So anyway, when I brought in Pendo, we launched an NPS framework, and where I think we received a lot of hesitation was that you have to lead by example with the data, and you have to make people comfortable with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Right. And a lot of times people don't want to hear the ugly or the bad. And so when we first launched our NPS feedback, it was extremely significant. We had over 1,000 responses in our first quarter, and we had 20% of those that responded left us sentiment, very tangible sentiment that we were then able to categorize. And it was not great. It was awful. And so here I am, don't kill the messenger, trying to get people along. Like, no, this is the reality. You think, just because we have thousands of users, but only X% of them are active. And here's what they're saying about the product. We need to work together to fix this. It was not easy, but you have to be able to make people comfortable, change the culture, and be okay with knowing that, yep, there's some things we need to address. Let's just dig in the dirt together to fix them versus, changing the narrative, right? I think that user data forces people to, it forces people into a narrative. This is actually what's happening versus them going and putting lipstick on a pig, right? For lack of a better term, which is what you want. You don't want to go into a room and present data that's ugly and that doesn't tell a good story. But even if the story's bad, that's an opportunity for you to work together to make it better. So those are some of the friction points that I've had along my journey.
I love that. And we're moving to the Q&A part. So Joseph, your question in the chat was really well timed. And if anyone else has questions, we'll try to get through them in the next 5 minutes. But kind of to the opposite of what you all were talking about, the question in the chat is, what if you have someone who's very protective of that data and is kind of guarding the silo? Sarah, I see you nodding your head. How do you kind of get around that? Or hope to get around it?
I don't know that I've had anybody that's been protective. So, I mean, Wes and Keith, feel free to weigh in here. I've had people that, present what they only want to present. Maybe that's a better way of they kind of shelter the data. Maybe that's the same thing, but they develop dashboards, and when you ask for access to certain things, hey, I'd really like to understand how you're getting to that, and you pull them aside, you eventually get there. And I think it's because they're just uncomfortable with the narrative, right? Uncomfortable with what it's actually showing. And so again, you have to change that culture, and really work to just say, this is okay. This is, we can work together to kind of to make things better.
Yeah, I saw that comment there about the HIPAA and FERPA directives. I worked for a company that we had to deal with that on a regular basis. And sometimes there is data that is really hard to decouple from personal information, really hard to decouple from first name, last name, address, all of those things. And that's understandable. With cases like that, understanding what you can decouple and what you can send out is the best way to go about that kind of data. Is talk to the people who are protecting that and say, hey, I would really like to know. So I'm looking at them clicking this button and I really want to know, I don't know what time of day it was or something. If you have Pendo, that would tell you, but in some cases you might not have that. And say, I don't need to know what their social security number is. I just need to know this kind of information. And having a foundation in place, some sort of workflow of how you can get that data is important, because you can tell that person or the people who are protecting that data, you have some data that is useful to us. What can I do? Can I do it? Is there a ticketing system I can do to start getting that and bring that in? But in most cases, you can separate the data and send things in, and you can anonymize the data and include a lot of information that still is useful to you. In other cases where it's not HIPAA and that kind of related, I do like to foster some communication in the organization with understanding that everybody should have access to data. I worked with a company once with Pendo, and I got into the business and they said, we're trying to be careful on who we give access to Pendo to. And I said, absolutely not. We should actually give access to everybody internally that wants access to it. I've gotten some amazing insights from support reps that had access to Pendo, that they were able to find some data that the product team just never was looking at, because the support teams were looking at different things that the person was asking them, when as product we were looking in the future on what features we were thinking about. And fostering that kind of culture is huge. And then also working with the people you can work with, it will foster that community where people will want to give you data as much as they possibly can.
That's a great answer. And Matt, that great question in the chat about what methods to improve those results. Like, you finally have the data, now what do you do with it, kind of thing. How do you increase the results that you want? And I know we only have 2 minutes left, so I did want to just add quickly, before we get into the answer there, if you want to learn more about Balboa and kind of see how we can help you in the future, shoot us an email at info@balboa.solutions. We'll put that in the chat. We'd love to speak with you, and as many customers as possible, so feel free.
Mm-hmm.
But to get back to your question, I think Keith and I, we've had some discussions about this, just what can you do when the numbers are bad, it's not what you want, then what? Like, what do you
Yeah.
do next?
I do have an answer for that. Make it really big on the screen. No, I'm kidding about that. Something I like to do is look at heat maps, see where people are taking their time on the page, because a lot of times you'll notice that the top right of the screen and the top left of the screen is mostly where they're doing their work. And if you have a button in the bottom right and it's just away from the heat map, they're sometimes not even noticing it. If you're using something like Pendo or WalkMe, you can do in-app guides to point to it, to show them that it's a new feature around there. That's another good one. There's a whole host of other ones, and I wish we had time, Matt. I'd love to meet with you and I could just give you a whole host. I would probably give you a novel of ways to do that as well. But those are the 2 ones that come to mind at first.
Awesome. And in our follow-up email, I'll also include the email that you can reach out to us with, as well as the recording. But since we are at time, I want to thank everyone again for joining and your very good questions. We hope you got to pick up some things and perspectives here, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for attending. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.